Hi, welcome to another News Watch. Today I'm going to be talking about an article that I read in The Guardian. I don't often read English news because, honestly, I have to be I have to be candid and say I don't trust them that much. But this one is such an apparent one that I believe it's true. Now, without further news, let's just go on with it. Now, in this news piece is in the Guardian, and it says here Trump administration to install Confederate statue toppled in Black Lives Matter protests. The statue of Albert Pike, a Confederate general, will return to Washington D.C. National Park Services say. Let's read on. This is a photo of the police extinguished the burning statue of Albert Pike in Washington D.C. on the 19th of June 2020. The photo is by Evelyn Hockenstein for the Washington Post via Getty Images. A statue of a general in the Confederate States Army was toppled and set on fire during social justice protests in 2020 in Washington, D.C., will be reinstated, the National Park Service has announced. The bronze statue, depicting Albert Pike, is being restored, the Park Service said in a statement on Monday, sharing a photo of the statue undergoing cleaning to remove corrosion and paint-dried repairs, with a view to reinstalling it by October. The restoration aligns with federal responsibilities under the Historic Preservation Law, as well as recent executive orders to beautify the nation's capital and reinstate pre-existing statues. A statement from the agency said, including an executive order issued by Donald Trump in March calling for restoring truth and sanity to American history. Good God. The restoration is just the latest action undertaken by the NPAs, faced with unprecedented staff cuts and threat to some 1 billion, of its federal funding under the Trump administration. That falls in line with the president's agenda to sanitize and rewrite the country's history. It has come under fire, blah 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 blah. This is all the question of the bloody statues. Then they talk about here about Floyd, that black guy that was assassinated, and blah blah. Then they talk a bit here about Pike. He was a long-time leader of the Freemasons, and they talk about the Freemasons as a secret society, and blah blah. And then the old story. Okay, let's focus back on me. Now, first of all, let me just drink a sip of water. If I can find the bloody water, here it is. Ah, first of all, I am a type of person that believes that sanitizing history and removing statues does no good. What you have to do is, for example, if you have a statue in a place of honor, you can remove that statue and put it, for example, in a garden. But you don't destroy the statue, you don't ignore it, you simply put an information, a plaque near the statue, and then you describe exactly what that person was. So, for example, if they don't like this Pike guy because he was a Confederate general and all of that and blah blah blah, then you put a plaque, you put it there and you tell the entire history. And we should do this with everything. And why, you wonder, do I think this? Because in 100 years' time, imagine that something like, for example, a Confederate future state or whatever rises. And they will say, and they will deny that this entire history ever existed. And they do what? Well, where is the proof? Where are the statues? Where is this? Where is that? Do you understand? Sanitizing history never works. You have to accept people are people. You have to look, and this is something that I learned in the Portuguese public school system. Okay, this is something that I learned in school, where uh, demons don't exist and saints don't exist neither. Okay, when we talked about a historical figure, we will talk about all the good that they did, and eventually, if they did it, the evil that they did. I like to quote this example, but for example, Afonso de Albuquerque was a famous Portuguese, let's call him admiral, and military man and explorer. And he was one of the pivotal pivotal characters that led for the Portuguese to be able to break into the Hindustanic market, let's call it like this, and establish trading posts and all of that all over India. Okay, because the Portuguese we didn't want to conquer, we wanted to trade. But that's another difference, another story for another stream. I'm just trying to give you an example. And that man, he was a bloody genius. Okay, but he was also a bastard. A bastard in the sense that he was cruel and he could be very cruel when he wanted to. So, what we learn in school is, for example, that in fact he was important in the sense that he forced the Mughals, the Islamic rulers of then India, he forced them to allow the Portuguese to establish trading posts in a lot of cities. Okay, Kolkata, Goa, today Mumbai, okay, Bombay, all of that. Okay, but in another sense, they talk about how he did it. First, they tried to do it the nice way. They asked, this was common, for example, for a city or a town with a port, so the Portuguese could enter, could establish in that point and trade in. Okay, we didn't invade the inland. We established ourselves in a city. For example, China gave, we didn't steal it like the British stole Hong Kong. China gave the Portuguese the city of Macau for us to establish there and trade with China. And then we return it. But carrying on. But this chap, François Bouquet, you know how he got them to give up on let's call it like this, on stopping the Portuguese from establishing themselves with their trading posts in India and trade directly with them instead of the Mughals sending it to the old via the old trading routes to the Arabic Peninsula and then into Turkey and whatever. You know how they did it? How he did it? He bombed the shit out of half of the Indian Peninsula. He bombed the cities. He destroyed their navy. He killed people. He burned cities. He did a lot. And we study this, okay? Uh, this is something that the Americans, and I think the English also, and I'm saying English also, have a lot to learn about. Because when you turn people into gods, you are unable to recognize their flaws. And this is very dangerous. And what I'm seeing here with this story, because let me put this clear, a black person in the United States that is the descendant of slaves. Of course, they have a reason not to want to walk around and see the bloody statue of some criminal that enslaved their ancestors. Of course, no, it's very natural. Okay, it's very natural and very humane to consider it. But the question here is, we have to put our emotions aside. So they don't like the statue of Pike. You don't put it inside of a museum like they are trying to say here to rot and to disappear into history because you are sanitizing history. You have to acknowledge that that person existed, that that person had relevance in the history of the country, that that person was a part of it, and that that person was both said person with importance and also a bloody creep. So instead, for example, of putting it in a place of honor, you know, select a garden or whatever, put a statue there of the man, and then put a plaque telling the story, telling it how it is, who that person was, what he did. That way, if someone talks about this did not exist, you grab their heads and you rub it in the plaque. History cannot be erased or sanitized. You do not do that. Okay? You do not deny something happened just because it offends you. You don't deny it. You face it. You face that our history is filled with monsters and saints and normal people. You go back into your family tree, and I have done that, and you will find everything. You will find normal people. You will find people with excellent character, people that did a lot for themselves, their family, and the people they live, the country and the place where they live in. And you also find bloody monsters. I also found a couple of monsters in my family tree. I have them. They are a part of me. I carry their genes. History is like this. History is like that, okay? History, all of these events are the genes of history. By denying them, you are denying a part of yourselves. So, for example, with that statue in that place of this guy, for example, I'm giving just this person as an example. I don't even know his full history, except for the few things that I watched. Instead of sanitizing this, you put that statue in the garden. In a garden, for example, I'm giving you a suggestion. Put it whatever you want, as long as it's visible and accessible to everyone to see. And then, for example, you take school kids there. You take classes there with a tour guide, and the tour guide explains, look, this person did this and did that. He did this and did that. You explain history. You look. One of the things that bothers me the most about some history books from these countries that I talked about, England and specifically the United States, is the way they sanitize history. You open a book of history here, and you will find everything. It's everything. Everything is there. Okay, there is no. Let's call it. There is no whitewashing of history. Okay, the Portuguese, for example, openly talk about slavery, and we also say things that might be trouble. This is a subject for another video, but we also say things that might be troublesome for some people to face up, for black people to face up. Do you know how the Portuguese, for example, started in the slaving business? Okay, we went to Guinea. I don't know how you say it. Guinea. We went to Guinea. We made agreements with the local kings and chiefs. Some Portuguese settlers even took on their daughters as wives. They married them, they established there, and then with their children, they took care of the business of slavery. And how was this done? Those chieftains had trade routes of slaves that they already sold to the Moors, to the Muslims, that also have a big history of slavery. And no one seems to talk about it, okay? I don't know why. They themselves, they talk about it. But subject for another video, another idea. And and then they would sell those slaves to the Portuguese, and then the Portuguese would sell them to whoever wanted them. Then came the English and the Dutch and the French, and they took over the business. Okay, and Portugal was one of the first countries to abolish slavery. But subject for another. But what I'm and there is even an anecdotal history of a king, one of those black kings, complaining to the Portuguese the representative that they had wrongfully arrested one of his sons and sent them to be killed. And of the Portuguese representative getting in contact with the captain that took them in via ship to be sold, probably probably to the Americas or to the Caribbean, and getting the boy back to his father. So, black people were an active part of slavery. And most Americans don't even know that or don't want to accept that. They always want to accept their position of the white man enslaving them. And I know this is very troublesome for people. But the fact is that black people sold black people into slavery, and it was a business for them. Different tribes uh, attacked each other, took on slaves, and then sold them to whoever bought them. So I know this because it's in our history books. It's there, it's written, it's taught. Okay, but Americans don't seem to know it. They just know about what was happening in their own country, where they have the black people enslaved, and they are still, in to a sense, enslaved, in my opinion. But that is subject for another video. Okay, but they don't know this. They created that narrative, and they are unable to accept the entire history of this difficult subject, slavery. It disgusts me too. It honestly disgusts me. Slavery disgusts me. I cannot conceive the idea of a person owning another person, however different they are. Okay, if you cut a black person, if you cut a white person, if you take their skin off, what's beneath it, it's the same. So this is ridiculous. Okay, again, tearing down statues and now this idiot is doing this stuff just to offend people, just to impose his vision of the world into people. This is what it is. But you don't see this here in this article. Okay? Again, this is why I don't like the Guardian much. Okay? Now they are going to put all the Confederate statues placed in museum. And why is this happening? This is happening because people don't face up to their history. They don't face up for things, for example, like Lee, for example, was an excellent general, one of the best generals the USA had at the time, but he was also working for a bunch of racists. They also don't want to accept that slavery was not the sole reason for the Civil War. They don't even accept that. Just like they don't accept what happened in Korea. just like they don't accept what happened in Vietnam, just like they don't accept what happened in Iraq and in Afghanistan. They don't accept it. They want to see their narrative, they want to see things as they want. And this has gone long beyond the scope of these videos, Newswatch, that I want to be there. I want them to be shorter, but I think it was important to talk about this too. We'll have to make some videos about this subject too. Now, I hope you like this video. Please leave me your insight in the comments below, and also visit the site. Go watch the piece in the Guardian, and please stay safe.